So much happened in this book that I forgot from the first time I read it. Welcome to rereading Maze Runner. I read this book once, I think, and it was a very, very long time ago. I've seen the movie quite a few times. Dylan O'Brien is in it, so. I remember the first time I read through this book, I was in like the very midst of my young adult dystopian phase, and I remember really liking this book, but being upset that there was not enough romance. We're like, what, 3/4 of the way into the book, and I'm like, there's not a single romantic connection in this book. If you do not know what The Maze Runner is about, it follows a 16-year-old Thomas who wakes up in a cage box situation to realize that he's been lifted into basically like, it's called the Glade. It's like a giant circular grass farmland situation. And on the outside of the walls surrounding it is a massive maze that the other teenage boys who are already there, who are called Gladers, have been trying to solve for about 2 years. Every month, a new Glader comes up through this box, but because Thomas is our special chosen one in this book, he comes up, and then 3 days later, a girl comes up. She's the first girl to ever show up in the maze, and she's clutching a note saying that she's the last one. Oh, by the way, inside the maze are these giant slime ball monster machine situations called grievers that will rip you into pieces if they can manage it, or they will at least sting you, and it is extremely excruciating, and it can also kill you. We're in a very dangerous situation. It's not like, oh, we're going camping. No. Now, I have read the whole trilogy, but this review is going to be just the first book because it's been such a long time that there were things that surprised me and I don't fully remember everything that happened. I feel like I more have glimpses of like scenes and imagery from the other two books because I'm pretty familiar with Maze Runner. And then the other ones, I don't know. They're kind of like, I don't know, they just slipped out. I don't remember most of the plot of the third book at all. So even though this was a reread for me, it does kind of feel like a first time around because I feel like I don't have the perspective of knowing what happens, if that makes sense, because I genuinely can't remember the third book. But I am going to go into spoilers. So if you have not read Maze Runner, it is your time to exit. It's a really short book. Also, if you have Spotify Premium, it's a free audiobook right now. Like I just found you can listen to the whole thing. You get 10 hours, I think, free listening to audiobooks on Spotify if you have premium. And if you do, like, I did 2.5x speed for this audiobook, so even though the book itself is longer than 10 hours, I was able to finish the whole thing. They actually have a ton of books. When I looked at first, Legend was also free. It's not anymore. So I guess they shift them around as to what you can read for free. But they also have The Giver on there, which is something I wanted to get to as a reread, so very exciting. Okay, now, goodbye to non-spoiler people. Go read, come back. We'll go into all the details. Okay, I took notes on my phone for this one. So we open up. It's such a good, like, iconic scene to open up on, I feel like. Thomas coming up in the box, and there's just darkness all around him, and he's hearing all these noises, which theoretically are grievers. And the only thing he remembers is his name. It's really interesting how they parse this out. Like, I think James Dashner did a really good job with, like, solidifying the lore and what does and doesn't work in this world, because it's very clear that Thomas has all of the memories of growing up in a very vague way. I think at some point he says he knows how to ride a bike, he remembers riding a bike, but he doesn't remember who taught him. He doesn't remember, like, specifics, but, like, all the boys in the Glade, like, they can speak, like, they know language, they understand, like, how the world works, they know how to plant things, they know all of the knowledge without any of the memory. I do, since this is a young adult book, it's so funny. All of the vocab they use to just replace swearing, like, they use words like shuck and shank and clunk and all these words that genuinely just like replace swearing so that this could be a young adult book, but they could still swear. I always thought that was so funny. It does make it a little disorienting at first, right when you're in there, but overall, like, it's easy to catch on to their lingo. And then also they call Thomas Greenie, which is what they call the new person in their little society that they've created. We meet Albie, and I always really liked Albie's character. I feel like he is far and above the most level-headed one. Like, maybe Newt is right up there with him, but he's so kind. Like, Thomas comes up and he's like trying not to act scared, I feel like, but Albie's so sweet. He's like, if you ain't scared, you ain't human. And I was like, exactly, like, you can show some fear. Every single boy here has been through this, and Thomas is trying his best to be like so chill. I was like, this is not a chill situation at all. We get Chuck as our tour guide. He was the most recent Greenie, so it's funny because, like, he's only been there a month, so obviously he knows his way around, but there's so many things that he also doesn't know, on top of the fact that people aren't going to tell Chuck things. He's like 12 or 13, and it seems like our eldest is probably like 18 in the Glade, so it's very much tribute age for or the Hunger Games. I do think the pacing in this book is really, really good. Like right away we hear a kid screaming, it's Ben, and he's been stung by a griever, and it's just a really, like, the lore drops I feel like are done very well in this book. We don't just sit Thomas down and like explain the maze and explain everything to him, which we could have done, though I think that would have been a boring way to do it. So just a quick little note of like, he's been stung by a griever, he got the medicine, but that doesn't mean you don't go through this experience called the changing, which we realize later is mostly just like getting some of your memories back. For the most part in this book, I know I do remember like some stuff from Scorch Trials, but as far as just book 1 goes, I would say Gally is probably our main antagonist, and he meets Thomas. He hates Thomas right away because Gally has already gone through the changing, and he sort of recognizes Thomas, and he's like, I don't know who you are, but I know I don't like you. He tells Thomas that he's in charge, which is not at all the case. I feel like as far as their leadership goes, it's like Albie is head dude, and then Newt is like vice president. Gally is one of the leaders, but I feel like he's trying to assert his dominance way too hard, and he tells Thomas that it would be okay for him to go up and see Ben, which is, it is not okay. Like, I think the guys, like, when a new person comes in, they really try to shelter them and ease them into it because it is such a scary situation, and they do have so much information coming at them. And that was something I really appreciated about the Gladers, which obviously, like, they were chosen for their intelligence, and so they go about it in a very smart way. Like, the way they have everything set up, I'm like, it's honestly a miracle that you put all these kids together and they haven't just devolved into madness and they've built this little society for themselves. They have very particular ways of handling new people and trying to not overload them and have them go a little insane. However, Gally does not care about that. And so we get a glimpse of Ben, who is not doing well. And part of the changing is like, I don't know if your veins turn green or like what the deal is, but it does look like you are kind of an alien for a little bit. It's night 1, so all of the walls close, the walls to the maze. And honestly, that would be terrifying. And I think the guys at this point, they've figured out that they've been placed there, I think. Like, obviously the way the walls move and the electronic beetles and stuff like that, they know that they're being watched, but they don't understand why. And they know that there's humans behind this because realistically, only humans would be able to make the walls like that. I kind of forgot that Chuck was like kind of annoying in this book because I remember loving him and thinking he's just the sweetest. And I think the guy who played him in the movie did a really great job of kind of like capturing Chuck's essence, I guess, of being kind of innocent, annoying younger brother type of vibes. However, he really is Thomas's only friend for a while. I think, you know, Albie and Newt, they view him as their new ward, basically. Like, they're not necessarily super friendly, I guess. And so Chuck takes Thomas to play a joke on Gally, and that's really all it takes for Thomas to be like, okay, like, yeah, Chuck's kind of annoying, but this is my new friend. But they're still new enough that he doesn't really feel like he can fully trust Chuck with like what he thinks. First of all, I feel like Chuck would be very bad at keeping secrets, and I think Thomas senses that right away. And so he kind of keeps it to himself for a little while, that he has this like feeling that he's been here before, and like he understands the maze maybe in a way that the other guys don't. And he also has this just deep feeling that he's meant to be a runner, to be one of the guys who goes out in the maze every single day and runs miles upon miles trying to find exits in the maze or clues about why they're there, how to get out. And even when he does kind of like tell Newt that that's what he wants, Newt is like, that is ridiculous. I feel like you work your way up to being that if you decide that's what you even want. I don't know if they do this to like acclimate them or just to like let them know what's out there, but they have this window thing in, I think, part of their little like homestead situation where you can look out and you can see into the maze, and Newt lets Thomas see a griever rolling past. Now, I can't remember exactly what they look like in the movie because it's been a while, but to me, in my brain, grievers are a giant ball of slime, like green slime, with just random weapons poking out of it, and they roll like centipedes and they absorb people like an amoeba. So like in my mind, yes, they're scary, but they're not as scary as I think they're supposed to be, because I'm like, oh look, it's a giant flubber just rolling away. Albie sort of gives Thomas the full tour the next day of the Glade, and one thing that Thomas notes is that there is a graveyard with quite a few graves in it, and he's like, why? Like, in a world of teenagers, why do we need a graveyard specifically? And then he also ends up seeing one of those beetle blades, which is, it's so weird because I feel like, I guess that's their way of spying on the Gladers, or like instead of just having cameras to make it more of an immersive experience for these guys, let's just put cameras in the bugs. Which is interesting to me, because obviously, like, the Gladers know that the maze is human-made, but I think it's kind of strange that they have the beetle blades in there, because it almost lets the Gladers know that people are actively watching them, and maybe that's what they want them to think. But I feel like if you were going to create this Glade and really make it so that you want them to not know anything, you would hide the fact that you're spying on them. Maybe they don't have the technology. I feel like, to me, it's almost like an arena for the Hunger Games. You can hide those cameras. But then again, you know, like, Katniss was able to find some of them. So maybe it's not possible to just completely hide them. But I feel like they were trying to, like, Truman Show these guys. So you wouldn't want them to know that you're watching. The box is back early, and everyone's freaking out because it's only supposed to come up like once a month with a new person. And Chuck says maybe they made a mistake sending you and they're sending your replacement. It takes like 30 minutes for the box to come up, so I feel like the anticipation would probably be killing them. Thomas asks if they've ever tried to send anybody back down the shaft, like with the box or whatever. And I just feel like sometimes I get it, like, he wants to ask, like, you gotta ask your questions, you know, but there were so many times where he would ask, like, have you tried this? Have you done this? And Newt is like, do you think we're stupid? Like, at times it was a little insulting. I was like, Thomas, obviously they would have thought to do that. Like, what do you mean? But apparently they did send somebody back down the shaft, and they physically got cut in half, which is just horrible, because if you think about it, the people who made the maze, like, they could have just made some sort of mechanism to just spit the guy back out or something. But no, they decided it would be fine to chop someone in half. They open up the box, and it's a girl, and it's the first girl to ever show up in the Glade. They think she's dead. She kind of looks dead. Albie asks if Thomas knows her, because first of all, Thomas does feel like he knows her, and I would assume that kind of shows on his face, but also it's odd that she came up just a couple days after him. The girl wakes up and just says something very ominous about everything is going to change, and then she passes out, but she's holding a note that says she's the last one ever. So everybody kind of naturally freaks out, and they take her into the homestead or whatever to try and, like, I guess nurse her back to health, because overall, like, she's technically in a coma at this point, I think. Thomas is trying to figure out, like, why they've been sent there, and he's like, I wonder if in our past lives we were all murderers and this is jail. Chuck's like, I'm 12 years old, dude. Like, what could I possibly have done? He sees Wicked, like, on the stomach of a bird, like, printed. We also find out, you know, what's printed on the walls. Like, it's not like they try and hide their brand name, I guess, but that means that also their birds aren't real. Outside of the animals that the creators send them to, like, have as livestock, all of their animals and stuff like that, the bugs, it's all artificial. For whatever reason, Thomas decides to go hang out in the graveyard. And then Ben, who has recently gone through the changing, comes and attacks Thomas. One thing I will say that I appreciate about Albie, because this has to be difficult, where you have these rules and it doesn't matter who breaks them. It doesn't matter how well you know this person. Because Albie comes, he's got his, like, bow and arrow, and he's like, I'm gonna shoot you if you keep attacking Thomas. And Albie does follow this very rigid code, because he's like, it doesn't matter that Thomas has only been here 72 hours max. He's gonna shoot another Glader for attacking him, because they do have to be so focused on maintaining order. I think they all realize the danger of not working together and defending one another, even the new people. Albie ends up shooting him. I thought he was dead. I think everybody did for a little while, but apparently he wasn't. In the interim, we meet Minho, who saw a dead griever. Now this is new information apparently, but we don't really get a lot of time to marinate on it, because JK, Ben is alive, but now he's gonna be banished, which I realize why they changed this in the movie. This is so, like, heart-wrenching to watch, because they put a collar around him and then kind of push him out the door and hold him there, like a sacrifice for the grievers. I think they eventually end up taking the collar off, because I was like, I can't believe that they just hold him there until a griever comes and gets him. I don't think that's actually how it worked. I think they did let him go, and, like, I guess he could have run, but obviously not really. But it's so brutal the way that they had, like, around the neck moving him out. Like, it's so creepy. I get why they changed it. In the movie, it's also sad. They're like, they have those things where they're just, like, kind of prodding him toward the door so that he can't escape, and it's really sad. And it's like the next day they all have to continue like that didn't happen. And they reference Ben being put out into the maze, but they don't talk about it with really much emotion, even though that was their friend. Like, they really have to have this sort of detached view from things, which is unsettling, I think, when you're reading it to see it. Thomas is trying to do the different jobs the next day, because they have these different, like, sections of stuff that people do in the Glade, but Thomas really wants to be a runner, and Newt tells him to drop it, because apparently Newt was also a runner at one point and got very injured. He has like a limp and he doesn't do the runner job anymore. And Newt's kind of on edge that entire day because Minho and Albie went out into the maze to look at the dead griever, and it's starting to get very late in the day and they're not back. And they know that every single night, like, the wall's closed. No one's ever come back if they've been out in the maze when the wall's closed. They get back. Listen, I know, I've read the book and I've seen the movie, and this scene, it doesn't matter. It always, like, my heart is just like, oh my gosh. We see Minho and Albie like struggling together trying to get into the maze, and Newt is like on the same page as Albie, like, you don't break the rules for anybody and it doesn't matter who it is, because it's very clear that those two are going to end up out in the maze and no one's running out to get them because that is not allowed. Thomas, however, does not care, and he goes into the maze, and as soon as the door shut, I was like, I wonder, Thomas doesn't really like dwell on it that long, but I'm like, do you just realize like what you've just done? I think I would panic. Apparently the griever that they went to go see was playing dead. This ball of slime decided to play dead, and then it stung Albie. Minho's like freaking out because no one's ever come back, and he's like, we're basically dead. I don't know why you came out here because now you're also dead. And he kind of just has an understandable panic and runs away. And I know that that means that he's left, you know, the new kid, and he's left their leader / his close friend. But I feel like Minho better understands what's coming for them because Thomas hasn't really faced down a griever before. I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying it was understandable. And then Thomas, because Thomas can't get himself to not fight against this. It's crazy what he does, the amount of strength that it actually would have taken to do this. He ends up tying Albie's like limbs to the different vines on the wall, and he hoists Albie up and leaves him there to hopefully like not have the grievers come find. The grievers can still climb the walls, by the way, but I guess, you know, if he's camouflaged well enough, maybe it's fine. The beetle blades are watching him though, and I'm like, listen, that is unfair, because if the beetle blades are sort of the eyes, are they directing the grievers? Because Thomas sees one and then a griever starts coming on his way, almost like there's like a signal happening. I'm like, that's not fair. Thomas ends up running into Minho in the maze, and they work together to sort of like trick the grievers into coming at them full force, and then they dive away and it goes over a cliff. But weirdly enough, it disappears as soon as it goes over the cliff because it's going through this like weird griever hole situation where it, like, you can't see it, but it does lead, I guess, down into what I assume is something under the maze. We come back. Albie's barely alive, but that's exciting. He is going through the changing, but we managed to get him the medicine like fast enough. Gally is trying to stir up people into thinking that Thomas is a spy from the creators, which I feel like obviously we like Thomas and we hate Gally, but as far as like an argument goes, I kind of understand where he was coming from. He's like, this new guy comes in, he somehow manages to save other people and live through the night in the maze. Like, what is that about? Because that's never happened before. But then we have, on the entire other end, Minho recommends that Thomas replaces him as the keeper of the runners to become the top runner, because he's like, you know, I freaked out. I left Albie. Thomas kept a level head about him, managed to work his way through the maze. His first go, like, he's never been in the maze before. And I think it makes sense because, like, obviously I think at this point Minho was running off of a lot of really intense emotion because Newt is like, he's only been out there once. We can't just have him be head honcho when he doesn't know what's going on, but he is going to be allowed to be a runner. Albie has finished going through the changing and he wants to talk to Thomas. And it's weird because, like, Albie and Newt are like thick as thieves. And so when Thomas goes in there and Albie's adamant that Newt leaves, it's really hurtful to Newt, which I think Newt is probably my favorite character. I just think he's such a sweetheart. But as soon as Newt leaves the room, Albie tries to say what he remembers and, like, he can't do it. It's like he starts to physically strangle himself, which is, like, weird because the creators have some amount of control over their brains. Like, I don't know what they've put in there, but they can, like, force them to do things that they don't want to do, because obviously Albie wasn't trying to strangle himself for fun. Apparently, the girl that they have also keeps saying Thomas's name in her sleep, which just kind of adds to the general suspicion. And Newt is like, you need to really focus and try to remember anything. And if you can't, he's like, we'll send you to the grievers to get stung. And he is 1000% serious about that. Then we get our first note of, like, telepathicness, where Teresa says her own name in Thomas's head. And Thomas is just like, I beg your pardon. She's, like, still in the coma, but her mind is awake and talking to Thomas, and she's like, a lot of my memories are going right now. It's like they're getting pulled out of her head. And she's like, before they disappear, she's like, we have these trials that we need to get through and that we helped create them, meaning her and Thomas. The conversation with Chuck is just deeply upsetting. Thomas is like, I'm gonna get you home, like, to your mom, to your family, whoever's out there for you. And it really does show, like, Thomas is, I think, kind of not calculating, but more cerebral than emotional, but he still has this, like, connection to Chuck. And then also Albie, because like Thomas is partly like wondering, he's like, am I evil? Am I a bad person? Like we made this maze. But Albie tells him, he's like, I can't tell you my memories because anytime he tries, he starts to like choke himself again. And so he's like, I can't tell you what I remember, but I know that you are not evil. But then we hear from Teresa, she's like, Tom, I just triggered the ending. I was like, girl, what? Like, wake up. Minho and Thomas go out into the maze and they try to figure out where the grievers are disappearing to. And they end up finding that griever hole by like throwing rocks and stuff. And when they come back, everyone is in a tizzy because the supply box did not show up as planned. And then poor Teresa is also waking up and she's like in Thomas's brain and he's like, please stop doing this. This is so freaky. And she's like, Tom, I don't know any of these people. She says she's forgetting everything. And the last thing she can really do is say the maze is a code, which is very important for us to get out of here. Eventually she wakes up. Thomas is like hiding again, probably in the cemetery. Don't know why he does that. And then Teresa comes and finds him to talk to him. But like they don't get too much information out because everybody else shows up and they're like, what the heck, dude? Like, why'd she wake up and immediately come to you? And then the doors don't close that night, which doesn't give Teresa much of a good look. So they put her in the slammer. The grievers come around the homestead, like they're able to get into the main part of the glade, which is not great. And Galley, since he has some of his memories, he's like, I don't know if the creators just told him to say this or like if he knew this immediately after and was just like waiting for the opportune time to tell them. But he says the grievers are going to take one boy each night. And then he gives himself up. And as he's being like, as I said, I see it as as somebody getting absorbed by an amoeba. And while that is happening, he's like, you guys don't want to remember the old world. Like, given the choice, you would want to stay in the maze. Minho follows the grievers to like see where they're going, and they end up going into the griever hole, and they do. And then when we come back, all the maps are burned. Like the boys who do the running, they come back every single day and they note down all the different turns because the maze changes during the night and they want these maps because they're trying to figure out if there's a way out. But now the maps are burned. Thomas goes to find Teresa and he finds her asleep, and it's so funny. There's so many times where Thomas is like, I cannot believe that this girl is actually asleep right now. And he's like, I can't believe you slept through the commotion of a griever being in the glade. And she says, you try coming out of a coma sometime. See how you do. I do really like Teresa's sass. And this is when Thomas is like, oh no, somebody just burned all the maps, and the maps were how we were gonna find the code. And he goes back to Newt and Minho and says this, and Minho's like, luckily, I hid the main maps. My notes say, Minho hid the maps. Huzzah! Thomas is going back into the maze. We're trying to figure out, you know, like if things still match up or if they've changed now that the walls don't like close at night. Chuck says, if your girlfriend gets lonely, I'll give her some lovin'. While they're out, Teresa has been helping some of the other people like figure out what the words are for like each section, I guess. They're trying to like line them up. And she says that they have words that don't make sense. At this point, Thomas is desperate enough that he's decided to go and get stung by a griever because, I mean, these grievers are going to come and take somebody every single night until there's no one left, basically. And so he does. He goes and he gets stung. After one of the grievers takes another kid, he runs after them and like tries to fight him off. He's like, okay, how do I get myself stung without actually being taken? And he ends up managing to do it, thankfully. And then he comes back, and while he's going through the changing, he realizes that all of them have been named after scientists, which is like actually really sad for the boys to realize because they're like, oh, the one thing we had when we showed up was our name, and those aren't even our real names. I was like, that is deeply upsetting. Thomas also knows that they've been raised by scientists. So their entire existence has been going towards putting them into this maze and being used as lab rats. And he says that it's basically a survival of the fittest situation and only the best of them are going to get out, which is like both upsetting and like, can you imagine? Like that'd be so scary. You're like, okay, am I one of those or am I one of, you know, the sacrifices? And also like, it would be really upsetting because people like Chuck, like the youngins, that's got to be a tough pill to swallow, knowing that you're weaker and probably not quite as smart as the older ones. And if you were just a little bit older, maybe that would have changed whether or not you get out. Obviously, it's not like it's a death sentence. All of them want to be in that group that gets out. But that's just really hard news to give. And Thomas is worried about it. He's like, I don't want to tell them these things and then they're going to turn on me. Luckily, they don't. Like, they really do take it in stride, generally. He says that he and Teresa helped build the maze and that they are part of the creators somehow, and but that they were forced to do it. It wasn't their choice to make the maze. And he's like, by the way, me and Teresa are telepathic, which everyone takes way better than anticipated. He says that basically their mission is to go through the griever hole, find the computer that runs the maze, and turn it off. I don't know how the creators determine which memories you get back, because Albie remembers the old world to an extent. He's like, I know one thing, and it's that I would rather die than go back there. And he's like, we should not be doing this. But like, he fesses up to the fact that like he burned the maps. He tells that to Newt, and it's like, Albie really, he's a good soul. Like, he feels bad about it, but he's also like, I did it because like we don't want to go back there. Like, we don't want to do this. And he ends up sacrificing himself to the Grievers that night because they decide to make a run for it anyway. Some of the Gladers don't go, which is sad. But Thomas and Newt and Minho are sort of like leading the charge to get to the Griever hole, and Albie still goes with them, and that's why he sacrifices himself. I think he truly didn't want to go back to the regular world, which I forgot because like my limited remembrance of the rest of the series, I genuinely thought that Albie was in Scorch Trials. They're fighting Grievers, and Thomas has this revelation. He's like, I love Chuck the way I would love him if we had the same mom. And I was like, that's a really specific wording, because like, why would you say it like that if they're not actually brothers? And luckily Chuck is there, because it's just Thomas, Chuck, and Teresa at the bottom of the thing, because all the other boys are still fighting off the Grievers. They know that those three need to get in there because Thomas is not going to go without Chuck, and Teresa and Thomas are the only ones who are going to be able to do this. And so they're trying all the words, and Teresa's like, the computer's not accepting it, I don't know why. And then Chuck is like, oh, maybe you just need to put the words in and then push the button that says kill the maze. I was like, guys, these doors slide open, and we only have half the Gladers now. Luckily, Minho and Newt have made it. They go down this slide, and then they find the creators, who are just like, they look at me and I look at them and they look at me. And they're just like staring back and forth at each other. And then Gally shows up, and I'm like, Gally, what are you doing here? Definitely thought you were dead. As soon as we saw him, I remembered what happened, because I forgot about this part. I mean, I obviously remember that Chuck died, but I forgot about this. And so Gally has this knife, and he's like about to stab Thomas, and then Chuck, bless his heart, jumps in front of Thomas and takes the knife, which is genuinely such a brave thing. Like, Chuck doesn't seem like the bravest soul, but at that moment, I was like, that's a big decision for such a young person. And Thomas is just, he's genuinely so beat up about it. Obviously, they get on this bus and they meet this woman who kind of just like gives us the rundown of what's happened. That there were these sun flares that like fried all of our technology, and then this disease broke out that people are calling the flare, I guess after the sun flares. She says that these boys were chosen for their intellect to be part of this experiment, and that Wicked studies their brainwaves because somehow that's going to help them cure the flare. Because when somebody is succumbing to the flare, they like get this animalistic instinct, and she's like, it is genuinely better to be dead than to have the flare. And she says that she's part of these people who refuse to let like the creators experiment on children, no matter how horrible the world gets. But then we get an epilogue where it's like the mission of Wicked is to preserve and observe, and this is the next part of the trials. I'm like, this woman is lying. And then she just mentions Group B, and I was like, there's another maze. And now like at the very end, I was like, I remember Group B. I can't believe I forgot that, but it makes me want to reread Scorch Trials. I have 1 minute left on this camera, so let me know what your favorite part was. Mine is like any time that Newt is like kind of sassy, because I love him. Please like this video if you liked it, click subscribe if you want to talk about more book stuff. My name's Katelyn, thanks for watching, bye.